The day I gathered the last of my belongings in the hush of early morning, I half expected her to spring from the bedroom, demanding to know what I was doing. But she slept soundly in our bed, her bed really, oblivious to how thoroughly I'd dismantled our life in the span of a single sleepless night. My heart hammered as I yanked open drawers, scooped out anything that was rightfully mine, and shoved it into boxes. She always believed I was too timid to walk away. She laughed whenever I threatened to leave, calling my bluff with a smug grin. Today I intended to prove her wrong. When the sun finally peeked through the curtains, I was gone, and she would awaken to find hollow echoes where our life once stood. That I used to think our relationship was something precious. Two people who overcame every hardship. We'd met at a mutual friend's party, both fresh out of college, stumbling through uncertain career paths. She was the radiant one, loud and confident, whereas I was quieter, content to listen more than speak. Her vitality drew me in, and I devoured the attention she paid me. In those early months, I felt alive in a way I never had before. She'd text me at random hours telling me she missed me, or she'd show up at my doorstep unannounced with takeout and that mischievous smile. My lonely heart soaked it up, convinced I'd found the one. But as time wore on, the brilliant spark I once saw in her hardened into something controlling and dismissive. At first, it was just subtle remarks about how I dressed or how I should make better decisions for my future. Then it escalated. She'd demand to know my every movement, who I was with, what I spent money on. I told myself it was normal, a sign of how deeply she cared. Yet each time I tried voicing my opinions about our plans, where to live, how to handle finances, she brushed me off, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "Don't worry," she'd say with a patronizing smile, "I know what's best for us." Her confidence I once admired evolved into a suffocating dominance. She also controlled all the rent and utilities, though I contributed half my paycheck each month. I never saw the bills. She insisted it was easier that way, that money matters stressed me out. Maybe she was right, I never was good at finances. But eventually, I felt shut out of every decision. She picked our apartment in a part of town she liked, put her name on the lease, decorated it to her taste, and seldom asked if I approved. The furniture was hers, from her old place, and she often reminded me I owned nothing of value. On the surface, we appeared fine, throwing parties, smiling in photos, but underneath I was slowly being erased. A turning point came when we adopted a cat. She picked it from a shelter on a whim, named it something I hated, and promptly told me to handle the litter box because it suited me better. The cat was adorable, no doubt, but it symbolized another unilateral decision she made without me. That same week, she started complaining about how lazy I was for not wanting to repaint the living room in a color she liked. I recalled how she used to praise my gentle soul. Now she rolled her eyes at my every preference. I swallowed the bitterness, telling myself love required compromise, but love shouldn't require me to vanish. Each argument left me feeling like a little boy scolded by a parent. Her smug "you're not going anywhere" remarks after particularly nasty fights stung like acid. She believed my dependence on her was absolute. And maybe for a while it was. I had nowhere else to go, few friends who didn't overlap with hers, and a bank account that never seemed to have enough to break free. She'd boast to our acquaintances, "He's too sweet to leave me. He needs me more than I need him." Hearing that, even in a teasing tone, hollowed me out. The final straw arrived on a night I can't forget. We'd been quarreling over something trivial, maybe the fact I forgot to pick up her favorite ice cream. She launched into a tirade about how useless I was, how no one else would ever tolerate my shortcomings. She said I was lucky to have her. That night I slept on the couch, tears burning my eyes. I realized then that I was done. Her assumption that I'd never dare walk away lit a fire in me. I deserved better. Maybe I was quiet and uncertain, but I wasn't worthless stealing myself. I began planning in secret. I squirreled away money in a hidden account, depositing little bits from my paycheck each month so she wouldn't notice a large drop-off. I reached out to an old friend from school, hoping for a job lead. She offered me a part-time gig in a different city, and while it wasn't big money, it was a foothold. Step by step, I laid the groundwork. All the while, I feigned compliance at home, letting her think I was still under her thumb. She saw my subdued demeanor as proof I'd accepted my place. Slowly, I started collecting whatever was truly mine. My laptop, clothes, personal trinkets that symbolized who I was before her. I'd stash them in a gym bag, telling her I was off to work out when in truth I was renting a small storage unit across town. Each time I'd deposit another small box of books or keepsakes. It took months, but eventually, I had almost everything that mattered stored away safely. I also prepared for a legal angle. While the apartment lease was in her name, we'd shared finances. I had receipts for countless household items I'd purchased alone: computers, some furniture, kitchenware. She'd claimed them as hers, but they weren't. I visited a legal aid center, learning that in our state, if you can prove direct contribution, you can claim partial ownership. It didn't matter that she listed everything under her name. Knowing this, I targeted specific possessions that I could prove I'd paid for. My plan was to remove them all at once, leaving her with the bare minimum. Not because I needed vengeance, but because I was tired of her flaunting how everything was hers. I wanted her to see how it felt when the floor vanished beneath her feet. The day came unexpectedly. We had a minor spat. She accused me of lying about working late. In truth, I was setting up my new part-time job. Her anger flared. She spewed insults about my incompetence, and for the first time I didn't cower. I just looked at her, silently noting every venomous word. When she finished, she glowered, expecting an apology. Instead, I calmly said, "I'll be out of your hair soon." She let out a derisive snort, retorting, "You? Don't make me laugh. You've got nowhere else to go." That was it. The final line. I felt a cool detachment settle over me. I just walked away from her, heading to our bedroom, heart thundering but face impassive. That night, I slept on the couch again, but for the last time under her roof. At dawn, I rose quietly, fueled by adrenaline. She slept deeply, as though secure in her dominance. I packed the rest of my clothes, not caring if she heard. The crinkle of plastic bins opening sounded too loud in the still air, but she didn't stir. I grabbed the items I'd purchased: a modest TV, the coffee machine, a small desk, my personal electronics, even the new curtains I'd bought last month. It was astonishing how many objects I'd contributed. I kept going, eyes scanning for anything I'd directly paid for. Piece by piece, I loaded them into a rented truck. The cat meowed from the corner, watching me, but I decided she could keep the cat. I wasn't equipped to care for it alone just yet, and something felt symbolic about leaving it behind. I worked like a machine for hours, sweat beading on my forehead. I expected her to wake at any moment, but she must have slept in, content after another victory. By the time she finally stirred, the apartment was nearly bare. I heard a muffled exclamation from the bedroom, something like, "Hello? Where are you?" Then she stumbled out, hair a mess, wearing an old robe. She froze at the threshold of the living room. The emptiness confronted her like a punch to the gut. Half the furniture was gone, the walls stripped of decorations I'd paid for, the TV missing. A half-packed box sat near my feet. I stood there, hands trembling, the last item in my grip: the lamp my father gave me as a graduation present. I tossed it carefully in the box. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, voice cracking. Instead of the usual fear or defensiveness, I felt strangely calm. "I'm leaving," I said simply. "Taking what's mine." She sputtered, scanning the room with a mixture of outrage and confusion. "You can't, I paid for," she trailed off, noticing how strategic my removals were. The large items she'd truly purchased remained: her fancy couch, the dining table from her mother, the knickknacks she favored. But all the rest was gone. I lifted the box, stared her in the eyes. "I can, and I am. Check the receipts if you need proof." She lunged forward, trying to snatch the lamp from the box, but I pulled away. Rage twisted her features, a panicked realization dawning that I might truly be done. You bastard," she hissed. "After everything I did for you? You just steal my stuff?" I let out a bitter laugh. "No, I'm taking what I paid for." "Big difference. And everything else? It's yours. Enjoy your half-empty apartment." She tried to block my path, arms spread wide. "You won't survive out there. You need me," she spat. Her tone was part panic, part fury. I met her gaze, felt no mercy. "I needed respect, but you never gave it," I said. "So I'm giving it to myself." We locked eyes for a beat. She saw a version of me she never believed existed. That moment, I glimpsed the genuine fear behind her anger. She stammered some threat about calling the cops. I shrugged. My receipts would hold up if it came to that. Then she switched tactics, saying we should talk, work this out. I just stepped around her, shaking my head, carrying the box out to the truck. I half expected her to chase me, to scream curses. Instead, she froze at the doorway, rooted in shock as I made trip after trip, removing every last piece I'd paid for until the place was bare of my presence. Eventually, she slumped against the wall, silent tears streaking her cheeks. If I'd seen that 6 months ago, I might have wavered, but the illusions had shattered. She'd hammered it into me that I was insignificant, that I'd never leave. Now I was proving her wrong, claiming my independence at last. When the truck was full, I stood at the threshold, taking in the empty space. Memories flickered. Our first day moving in, her triumphant grin at decorating decisions, the parties we hosted. All overshadowed by her belittling remarks, her sneers whenever I suggested something. This was once our home. Now it was just a hollow shell. I offered no goodbye. She tried once more to speak, voice cracking. You can't do this. You'll regret it. You can't survive alone. I glanced at her, a pang of sadness flaring, but also a sense of release. I'd regret staying, I whispered. And with that, I walked out. Driving away, I felt a swirl of adrenaline, fear, and a raw sense of relief. I had nowhere stable to go, just a small storage unit and a friend's couch. But the open road seemed oddly comforting. There was no turning back. Each mile put distance between me and her tyranny. My phone buzzed with messages, her number flashing. I turned it off. I needed peace, a moment to breathe without her voice filling my head. Over the following weeks, I discovered just how liberating solitude can be. Sure, it was tough adjusting to a smaller place, a smaller paycheck, and uncertainty. But I no longer walked on eggshells. I no longer dreaded waking up, bracing for her criticisms. My self-esteem, battered as it was, began healing. Friends emerged with support, some offering me part-time gigs or couches to crash on. I pieced together a modest living, determined not to fold under fear. She tried reaching out, sometimes with anger, sometimes with apologies. She threatened legal action for the items I took, but I calmly sent her scans of receipts. She had no ground to stand on. Then she switched to emotional pleas, talking about how lonely she was, how the apartment felt cold without me. I read those messages with a pang of pity, but I reminded myself of the years I'd spent feeling lonely in her presence. Love, if that's what we ever had, requires respect. Without it, love is just a word. Eventually, I found a stable job in another city, loaded the furniture I'd salvaged into a rental van, and moved on to a fresh chapter. Occasionally, mutual acquaintances updated me on how she was coping. Apparently, she resented me for abandoning her, painting me as ungrateful. Let them believe what they want. I knew the truth. She'd hammered me with scorn until my spirit nearly broke, and still assumed I'd never leave. But I did, and in doing so, I salvaged my sense of self. Now, months later, I reflect on how drastically life has shifted. My new apartment, though modest, brims with items I chose, my furniture, my style. A mirror I bought with my own money, an armchair no one sneers at. I've learned to manage finances, forging independence she claimed I'd never achieve. Some nights, I still dream about the empty look in her eyes when she realized she'd lost control over me. I wake up unsettled, but I also remind myself that leaving was the best decision I ever made. Friends sometimes ask if I miss her at all. I miss the version of her that existed in our early days, yes. The warm-hearted young woman who made me feel special. But that person had faded long ago, replaced by someone who believed I was a doormat. I can't miss the cruelty, the manipulations, the dismissals. If anything, I've found clarity in how crucial respect is in any relationship. The slightest whiff of disrespect now sets off alarm bells in my head. The one thing I sometimes regret is not leaving sooner. I wish I'd believed in myself enough to walk away the first time she demeaned me, but I can't change the past. I can only embrace the future I fought for when I quietly packed up my belongings and left her in that hollow apartment. Looking back, it was more than just a departure. It was an act of reclaiming my life, proving that even the quietest person can rise against oppression once they've had enough. She might have thought I'd never leave, that I'd always fear the unknown more than her wrath. She underestimated me. I hope in the long run we both grow from this. Perhaps she'll learn the limits of control, perhaps I'll learn to assert myself sooner. For now, I treasure each day of freedom, each moment unburdened by her shadow. And if she ever wonders how I managed to slip away so completely, the answer is simple. I found courage in the realization that staying was killing me, and leaving was my only shot at truly living.